Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. of the 2022 Open Simulator Community Conference. In this session, we are pleased to introduce the presentation, George's Dock, Liverpool, Reimagining a Late Victorian Transport Hub. Our speaker is Graham Mills. Graham is a retired university academic with an amateur interest in the history of Liverpool. Please check out the website found at conference.opensimulator.org for speaker bios, details of sessions, and the full schedule of events. The session is being live streamed and recorded, so if you have questions or comments during the session, you may send tweets to @OpenSimCC with the hashtag OSCC22. Welcome again, everyone, and let's begin the session.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here again. And thanks very much to the organizers for making the arrangements for this conference and all the developers and the content creators that help make this world. I've been interested in and presenting on aspects of Liverpool history and builds based on them from a very amateur perspective, both from the history aspect and also from my build quality, so please don't judge me too harshly, for a few years now. And I've kind of moved mainstream at last, and I'm dealing with the main waterfront of Liverpool, which you can see in front of you here. When I remember, I will actually put some chat in as well. Now, this photograph is taken from the opposite side of the River Mersey. It's just over half a mile across, and on the other side is a place called Birkenhead, and it's on the Wirral Peninsula, and I will mention that in passing and show it on a map later. The particular area that I'm building is a 2x2 VAR, and it corresponds roughly to the area that you can see on the next slide. These days, it's heavily built over. Those three buildings that you can see, the large buildings, are sometimes referred to locally as the Three Graces. The solitary building that has carried over from the time period that I'm talking about is the church, which is colloquially again called St. Nick's. So you'll see that in some of the photographs I'll show you later. On the extreme right-hand side, you can see the Museum of Liverpool, which is a modern building just creeping in from the right there. So the question I'm asking basically is how Liverpool grew, and how in particular these later developments in Liverpool's history came to be. Historically, I've been interested in the development of the very early docks and also the early railways in Liverpool, and this kind of brings the whole thing together to some extent. This map here, you can see the Mersey running from right to left, and the area that we're talking about today is shown in red at the top, and is as it was in 1859. My build is actually focused much later in 1895, and by that stage several changes had happened. And to a large extent, this is based on the fact that people wanted to live somewhere healthier than Liverpool, which in mid-century was actually a rather nasty place with cholera and all kinds of nasty things happening. And with the advent of steam, ferry traffic became quite intense between Liverpool and Birkenhead. And the departure place was the landing stage by George's Dock. Now, very handily, this also happened to be near to the business district. So many of the sort of more well-to-do office workers and businessmen could actually live on the leafy and green Wirral, as it were, and commute to work by the ferries. At the same time, a little bit further along on the left there, you can see arrows pointing out to the Atlantic. And this just indicates that the ferry traffic was not only the only things that were going on, there was transatlantic steamers as well, going first to the Irish Sea and then on to the Atlantic. By 1895, the main access point to George's Dock, which was something called George's Basin, had disappeared. It had been filled in to create better access to the landing stages. And the two landing stages, the one for the ferries and the one for the transatlantic steamers, had been joined. And this is shown in the enlarged inset. So this is what George's Dock looked like around about 1860. You can see it's intensely full of mainly sailing ships. There's a large transit shed there. The transit shed where goods were unloaded into before being moved away. You can see lots of slow moving road traffic along the dock road and a big row of warehouses called the Gorey warehouses on the right hand side. And in the middle you can see some railway tracks, and as the inset shows, there is a little omnibus going up and down these tracks. It was a very clever little omnibus because it used the railway to avoid the slow-moving traffic, but when it came across slow-moving trains, it could move off the tracks. The flanges that it used on the tracks basically retracted and it moved onto the road and bypassed anything that was an obstruction. So this ability to communicate between the docks, which now stretched for some 5 miles, was very important. When we move to the time when my build is situated, things have changed quite dramatically. The George's Dock Basin, the main access point, has disappeared. There is a small channel called George's Dock Passage, which is now used rather inconveniently to access the dock, and only small coastal craft are using it. The omnibus that we saw previously has been supplanted to a large extent by a new overhead railway, a tremendous development at the time. And this was opened in 1893, and you can see a station there. That's George's Dock Station on the left, and the train itself on the right by that big row of warehouses that I talked about previously. And you can see that there are far fewer ships in the dock now, as I said, and they're much smaller. And this basically was foretelling the doom of George's Dock, which closed in about 5 years from there. So the first demonstration I'm going to show you is of the overhead railway, which you can actually see in real life, a remnant of in the Museum of Liverpool. Basically a museum to some extent built around this carriage. So there is the viaduct over which the rails were carried. You can see the rails for the dock railway are still there. The omnibus itself had to move off the railways at this stage. It went back onto the streets. It didn't disappear. The old technology continued and competed on price and availability. So there's the carriage. I hope you can all see that. And the carriages were, this was the world's first elevated electric powered railway. The trains normally comprised 3 of these carriages running along the 5 miles or so of the dock. And initially they were used basically to communicate between the docks so that businessmen and artisans could move between locations. Subsequently, it broadened out to include people commuting into work from residential areas, and also ultimately it was a very important tourist attraction people could go and see the docks in operation from the comfort of one of these carriages. All the time, the dock railway continued, was very important in moving goods from the docks to the main goods stations, and little locomotives like this one would pull wagons along. They had relatively short wheelbases to enable them to cope with the narrow curves, the sort of tight curves often found in the dock. So from one railway to another, this is the underground station which I'm building, which is adjacent to the George's Dock and in a street leading down to it called James Street. So not only was there a overhead railway running the length of the docks, there was also a railway running under the Mersey, and at the time the tunnel that was built was the largest such underground tunnel, underwater tunnel I should say, in the world. So again, a sort of major development. The counterpart, the station at James Street, as you can see, had this huge tower. None of that remains, unfortunately. There is a station there still, and the underground part still exists, albeit much of it is now substantially modified. The station in Birkenhead that the underground railway went to under the Mersey is still there, so you can see that in the inset picture. The reason the tower was there was not to make it look pretty, but in fact to drive the lifts or elevators that were needed to take passengers down 90 feet to the lines below. There was a water tank up there that provided hydraulic power for rams that lifted and lowered the passenger lifts or elevators. So if we now go inside the booking hall, you can see the lift, which was really quite a grand affair. It was called an ascending room. I don't know if there was a corresponding descending room, but they came not only with mirrors, but to make the place brighter. They had a gas lamp and they had seating all the way around, so it was really quite a refined affair. Continuing on down to platform level, we can see a train that was actually steam driven, so the engine was pulling a short train of carriages, and again I can just give you an impression of what the station would have looked like. And this is one of those moments when you actually can have lots of fun, because I suddenly decided that, or discovered that, having built this station, I had a 400-foot gallery in which I could display adverts from books, which the British Library has posted on the internet. So choosing suitable adverts has been a sort of a nice distraction. So here's the engine. A slightly unusual engine, no roof for the engineers, locomotive engineers, because of course they were in a tunnel most of the time. Because it was a steam engine, of course, it generated a lot of steam. And as you can see, there's additional pipework channeling the steam into the side water tanks. And that was intended so that the locomotive engineers could actually see where they were going. These engines were actually the most powerful ones in the world at the time. They're not very pretty to look at. And the reason for that was that they had to negotiate a 1 in 27 incline as they came up the other side of the Mersey. So rather a chunky engine as such. By comparison, as far as I can work out, the carriages were quite small. And again, that may be part and parcel of the fact that they couldn't really cope with a terribly heavy load. The enterprise was not entirely successful, it has to be said, largely because I think they'd overestimated the number of people that were interested in departing from using the ferries, which were the main competition for them. And the atmosphere below ground was probably not that nice, even though there was forced ventilation. So it didn't prove to be terribly cost effective. Of course, they had a tremendous debt to repay in terms of the production, the building of the tunnel. Now, I've mentioned already the omnibus. There was another horse tram service that actually went down to George's Dock Parade itself. And we can see this here. And this had to cross St. George's Passage, which I mentioned. This was a major problem, so they had to have a swing bridge across this. And the swing bridge would take one of these relatively low-lying trams, because it had to pass under the overhead railway, so it couldn't be more than 16 foot high, or you'd have to duck as it went under. And where they were going with this tram, of course, was the landing stage. This is the last of the builds. So this is a sort of preliminary build of the landing stage. You can see the little gateways and the ramps that were lowered to enable people to get onto the ships. Some of these were run by the corporations, by and large, who were on the Wirral, and some of them, in particular the Birkenhead one, had slightly more fancy arrangements so that people could also get off the upper levels of the ferry. So they had a raised entrance as well. And last but not least, this rather complicated arrangement is a bell, which is used for navigation during the fog, and above that what is called a time ball, which was used to help people synchronize their watches and chronometers. And finally, the ferry has arrived, and whoops, and it's gone again. My apologies. And the competition with the Underground Railway actually stimulated the acquisition of new ferries. They moved away from paddle steamers, which they'd used previously, and were now somewhat archaic, towards twin screw ferries such as this one. Just to say that I've modelled also another station which took trains down to the transatlantic stage. This is actually hanging off the build at the moment. And last but not least, I can just say thank you to everybody. And I'm on my last slide. What remains? Very little, although it's an important heritage area. And what I'm hoping to do in the future is focus on notional journeys of people that came to this area in 1895. Thank you very much, and apologies for overrunning slightly.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much, Graham. It's always interesting, and as Thursday said, wonderful models on the in OSCC. Thank you very much. And as a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out the site conference.opensimulator.org to see what is coming up on the conference schedule. You won't want to miss our next session, which will begin at 8:30 in this keynote region and is entitled Blue Man in the High Castle. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC22 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations. Also, explore the hypergrid resources in OSCC Expo 2 region, along with sponsor and crowdfunder booths located throughout all of the OSCC Expo regions. Thank you again to our speaker and to the audience.